The water stopped before sunrise, not with the clean finality of a broken bank or a fallen limb. It thinned. A steady run beneath Red Gate's headgate, narrowed to a brown ribbon, weakened again, then vanished before reaching the first potato furrow. Viola Ames stood ankle-deep in Willow Bend Ditch and watched the last dark thread sink into thirsty Oregon soil. August 28, 1887. 36 days before her crop note came due. Far fewer before the buried potatoes began to shrink beneath the ground. She climbed onto the bank and crouched beside the red cedar stop plank. The board was nearly 3 feet wide, dark from years of water. Her father had cut a double V notch into its upper edge and once repaired a split with a strip of copper held by 3 square nails. She knew every scar in that wood. One mark had not been there the night before. A fresh saw cut crossed the plank, at the point where pressure bit hardest, pale cedar showing beneath the wet surface. Whoever made it had not meant the board to fail immediately. They meant the water to finish the work and make the damage look natural. Viola ran one thumb along the exposed grain. Clean, recent, deliberate. Hoofbeats sounded beyond the cottonwoods. She rose as Morton Pryce and Alden Rake came down the upper road. Pryce rode a broad bay gelding and wore a dark coat too fine for ditch work. Rake sat lower in the saddle, range dust pale on his boots, one hand resting near the horn. Neither man carried a shovel, saw, or length of rope. Pryce stopped beside the ditch. "Morning, Miss Ames." Viola wiped mud from her palm onto her work skirt. "You're on Redgate ground. The ditch is shared." "The ditch is. That road isn't." His gaze moved over the empty furrow. "Looks like you have trouble." "It looks like somebody upstream is taking more than his turn." Rake shifted his weight. Pryce rested both hands on the saddle horn. "Granite Fork has 300 head to water. Cattle cannot wait because a small farm planted beyond its means. My turn began before dawn. A turn means little if you lack the hands to use it." He glanced toward the barnyard, the cracked wagon sideboard, and the quiet fields beyond. "Your father understood that. The mention of her father was meant to bend her." Viola stood straighter. "My father also understood where his fences ended." Pryce reached inside his coat and withdrew a folded paper. Viola recognized the writing before he opened it, her original crop note. He had acquired it from the Baker City Mercantile in June, and since then his visits had become more frequent, his manner more patient, his patience more dangerous. "October 3rd, he said. "That is not much time to harvest without water or hired men." "The date has not changed." "No, but the terms can." Cold ditch water seeped through Viola's boots. She refused to step onto dry ground while he sat above her. "Say what you rode here to say." Pryce unfolded the note fully. "Marry me. I will see that your full turn reaches Red Gate. I will extend this through winter. 6 men will report here for harvest." Rake turned his head toward the hills as if he had heard none of it. Pryce continued. "Granite Fork uses your south lane for winter cattle, and I take charge of the farm accounts, not help. Transfer, water, road, debt, books." Her name might remain on the gate, but nothing behind it would answer to her. "No." Pryce folded the note once. "You should consider what pride costs. I have. A woman alone cannot hold this place through winter." Viola stepped out of the ditch. Mud pulled at her hem, but she faced him without raising her voice. "Then you'll have the pleasure of watching me fail without your name on my gate." Rake released a brief breath that might have been amusement. Pryce glanced at him, and the sound died. "When the note comes due, sentiment will not count as payment. Neither will threats. You mistake warning for threat. You mistake refusal for negotiation." Anger entered Pryce's eyes and vanished almost at once. 36 days, Miss Ames." He tucked the original note back inside his coat. "Granite Fork's cattle will have water. You should decide what matters more to you, this ground or the right to say no." Viola held his gaze. "They are the same thing." Pryce touched 2 fingers to his hat and turned the bay toward the road. Rake followed, but before he wheeled away, his eyes dropped to the stop plank. Not the empty ditch, not the dying potatoes, the fresh saw cut. Viola saw him see it. She waited until both riders disappeared beyond the cottonwoods before kneeling beside the board again. The cut could be reinforced for a day or 2. The missing water was another matter. She needed to walk the ditch upstream. Reset the east flume, shorten the weakest rows, protect the seed stock, and find harvest hands who valued wages more than Pryce's displeasure. Behind her, the red gate creaked. Viola reached for the shovel lying in the grass and turned. A gray gelding stood outside the fence, with mountain dust dried along its neck. The rider had already dismounted. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, and weathered without looking old. A used rope hung in a proper coil from his saddle. One bedroll, one coat, one horse. He kept both hands where she could see them. "Mom," he said, "I heard in Baker City that Redgate might be hiring." "Who told you?" "A liveryman named Phelps. He talks too much." "That was my impression." The gelding lowered its head toward the grass without pulling against the reins. The stranger noticed Viola studying him. "His name is Slate." "I didn't ask." "No, Mom." His eyes moved toward the dead furrow, then to the cedar plank. He did not approach it. "You have water trouble." "I have eyes. I meant no offense." "Most men don't. They manage it anyway." His mouth almost formed a smile, but he thought better of it. "Caleb Driscoll." He removed his hat. "I can mend fence, handle stock, drive a team, cut timber, and work for crop money if the terms are honest." Viola tightened her grip on the shovel. "How long do you stay in one place?" Caleb took time before answering. "As long as the work holds." "That isn't an answer." "It's the one I have." The thirsty fields lay behind her. Pryce's folded note seemed to remain between the cottonwoods. Viola had no cash for wages, no brother to summon, no father coming home. A hired man could work 3 days. Here Granite Fork was offering more, and disappear before harvest. She had spent years proving she could run Redgate without being owned by anyone. Now survival demanded something more lasting than labor, and more dangerous than solitude. She studied the mountain saddle, the worn rope, the patient gray horse, and the stranger who had not once stepped through her gate without permission. Then she said the most reckless words of her life. "I need a husband, not a cowboy." Caleb did not laugh. He did not move closer. He set his hat against his thigh and gave her his full attention. "Then tell me what a husband has to do." Viola lifted the wooden latch and opened the red gate. "Come see the farm before you answer." "Sua." Caleb led Slate through the open gate, then stopped before the gelding's front hoof crossed the first irrigation furrow. "Where do you want him?" Viola pointed toward the hitch rail beside the barn. "There, not beneath the cottonwood. The ditch has eaten under those roots." Caleb changed direction without asking why. Slate followed on a loose rein, ears turning toward the weak scrape of water below the headgate. Caleb tied him with enough line to reach a basin, but not enough to nose the stacked tools. He filled the basin from his own water bag, then returned to Viola with his hat still in one hand. "The farm first?" "The plank. The farm will still be failing when we finish." She carried a hammer, a narrow iron strap, and 2 square nails down to the ditch. Caleb came behind her, but did not step into the channel until she pointed to the opposite bank. The red cedar stop plank remained seated in its grooves. Her father's old copper strip crossed the earlier split, fixed by 3 blackened nail heads. Below it, the fresh saw cut showed pale against the wet wood. Viola fitted the iron strap over the weakened place. "Hold the board steady." Caleb crouched and braced it with both hands, taking care not to cover the old repair or the double V notch. Viola drove the first newer nail through the iron. The blow rang across the ditch. "Whoever cut this knew where pressure would finish the job," Caleb said. Her hammer stopped above the second nail. "You have seen it done." "I've seen timber weakened so water could take the blame." "Where?" His hands did not move against the cedar. "On work where broken board was easier to explain than a missing one. That answers how, not where. No, or who. No." Viola drove the second nail until the square head sat flush. "You entered this gate asking for honest terms." "I did." "Then do not make honesty a rule for the other person." Caleb released the board only after she tested the brace. "That is fair." "It is not fair yet." The copper strip held. The new iron held. The current beneath them remained too weak to fill one furrow properly. Caleb looked upstream toward the cottonwoods and Granite Fork's higher ground. He offered no further answer. Viola lifted the hammer. "Come see what you would be promising to stay for." She showed him the potato rise first. 10 acres climbed on a slope, gentle enough to fool anyone who did not know water. The upper leaves had lost their sheen, and the soil broke into powder beneath her boot. "Those rows drink before the beans," she said. "The lower ground keeps moisture longer." Caleb studied the fall rather than pretending he understood it. How long before the seed rows suffer? 4 days at this flow. Less if the nights stay warm. How many hands do you need at harvest? 3 more than I have. Cash wages, after sale. If there is a sale. If there is not, no wage promise will matter. He nodded once. No pity. No grand offer to rescue 10 acres with 1 pair of hands. They crossed to the east flume, where a pine support had split and sunk into the bank. Caleb pressed 1 boot against it. This needs replacing before a full turn reaches it. Seasoned pine is under the lean-to. Same length, same fall. Raise it 1/2 inch and the orchard loses water by evening. Then I won't improve it. Viola glanced at him. Most men use that word before changing what they do not understand. I'll ask first. She led him through the livestock lot, past 2 milk cows, 4 hogs, the hens, the mule team, the cracked wagon sideboard, and the barn roof that leaked when spring rain came from the west. Caleb asked which repairs threatened the crop, and which could wait until winter. He did not suggest selling a cow, cutting down the orchard, or borrowing against the land. In the dry room at the rear of the barn, Viola stopped beside a low cedar chest resting on stone blocks. Its boards had darkened with age. 1 hinge had been replaced years earlier. The latch sat crooked, and a single iron handle showed on the near side. "Seed reserve?" Caleb asked from the threshold. "Part of it. Bean seed now. The best potatoes go in after harvest." Viola placed 1 palm on the closed lid. "My mother kept this chest before I was tall enough to lift it. Nothing inside is opened, sold, or traded unless I decide. You may inspect the outside." Caleb entered, crouched near the hinge, and kept his hands away from the latch. Cedar kept it dry. That was the purpose. "The handle is working loose. I know, the latch may fail before winter. I know that too." He rose. "You know nearly everything wrong here." From another man, the words might have been mockery. From Caleb, they sounded like recognition. Viola lifted her chin. "Knowing what needs doing and having enough hands are different matters." "Yes," he said. "They are." By late afternoon, heat had turned the yard pale with dust. Viola set 2 plates on the kitchen table: beans, cold beef, and yesterday's cornbread. Caleb washed at the pump and paused inside the doorway until she pointed to the chair opposite hers. Between them lay a mercantile account statement, Viola's written copy of the debt amount and collateral, the farm inventory, a clean sheet of paper, and a sharpened pencil. The original crop note remained with Morton Pryce. Viola tapped the statement. "Price owns the note. The standing crop secures it. The full amount is due October 3rd. Caleb read every line before setting the paper down. "Can you pay if the harvest holds? Barely. If the water stays reduced? No. If I work until then. I cannot promise cash wages before the buyer pays. You already said that. Men hear debt differently when they see the figures. I hear it the same." Viola took up the pencil. "Then these are my terms. Redgate remains mine. The livestock, tools, crop, and seed remain under my control. You do not sell, pledge, mortgage, trade, or remove anything without my consent." "Agreed. Separate rooms." "Agreed. No claim on my bed because a justice calls us married." His answer came without hesitation. "Agreed. Every major decision about this farm is spoken before it is made. After harvest, either of us may leave. The other does not use property, threat, debt, or force to prevent it." "Agreed." Caleb rested his forearms on the table. "My terms." Viola set down the pencil. "Say them. You do not hide another debt if I am expected to work against it. You do not hide danger because you think asking for help gives me ownership of the choice. If a job needs 2 people, I get to say so. You may say it, I may disagree. That sounds honest. Anything else? Land is not wages. If I leave, I take only what I brought, and whatever cash we agree I earned." Viola wrote it down. Caleb glanced toward the short hallway. "Which room is yours?" "The one at the end. Does the door lock?" "Yes. Write that you keep the key." Her fingers tightened around the pencil. "That is understood." "Write it anyway." Viola studied him, then added the line. "You would sleep in the bunk room beside the barn. Until you decide otherwise. Do not assume I will. I don't." The kitchen clock marked the pause between them. Viola turned the page so he could read it. You still have not answered. No. You have seen the crop, the water, the debt, and the work. What remains? Caleb looked through the window toward Slate. Whether I can promise to stay when staying is the whole price. It was the first answer that revealed anything he might lose. Viola folded the terms once. How long do you need? One night you may sleep in the barn loft, not the bunk room. Fair. At dawn I want your answer. Caleb carried his plate to the wash basin, then stopped before touching the pump pitcher. May I mend the east flume before I sleep? That is not part of an agreement yet. No, it's part of supper. He left the house as the first long shadow from the Blue Mountains reached the yard. After dark, Viola carried a lantern to the ditch. Her father's copper strip held, the new iron brace held. 2 fresh square nail heads shone above the weak current. But the water had fallen again. It barely covered the channel bottom. Upstream, someone had taken more while she and Caleb sat writing rules about honesty, and the man sleeping in her barn had recognized the method before she had told him what it meant. At dawn, Caleb stood beside the repaired east flume with his bedroll tied behind Slate's saddle and the folded marriage terms in his hand. The new pine support sat square beneath the channel. He had matched the old timber, preserved the fall, and packed the disturbed bank hard enough to hold when a full turn came again. He had not raised it half an inch. Viola stopped on the path between the house and barn. You are packed, I am. Then I have my answer. Not yet. Caleb crossed the yard and placed the folded paper on the pump shelf. His name appeared at the bottom in a narrow, steady hand. I'll stay through the agreement. Viola did not reach for it. Through harvest? Through what I promised before the justice. Bad work won't release me. Better wages won't either. And if you regret the marriage, regret isn't permission to break my word. Slate shifted at the hitch rail, leather creaking against the saddle. Caleb kept his hands away from the reins. I won't claim Red Gate. I won't enter a room you close to me. I won't sell what is yours or call your decisions mine because a paper gives us the same surname. Viola picked up the terms. Marriage will not make either of us wise. No. We may still find reasons to wish we had chosen differently. That is possible. At least you understand the bargain. I understand enough to sign it before witnesses. Viola folded the paper and tucked it beneath her arm. Then unhitch your bedroll. We leave for Baker City in an hour. She changed into the dark brown dress she wore to church and funerals, then placed the mercantile statement, her written record of the crop debt, the farm inventory, and the marriage terms inside a leather document case. The original note remained with Morton Pryce. Before closing the barn, she checked the cedar seed chest. Its lid remained shut. The crooked latch still held. The single iron handle had not moved. By 7, the mule team stood harnessed to the light wagon. Caleb offered to drive. Viola took the lines. You do not know this team. No, Mom. He climbed onto the seat without argument. The road north crossed dry Baker Valley beneath a clear, late August sky. Freight wagons moved toward the railroad, and a telegraph boy hurried between storefronts with a folded message in one hand. Caleb asked only questions connected to the farm. Which users held turns below Red Gate? How far did Willow Bend run above Granite Fork? Who had kept the debt before Pryce acquired it? Viola answered what he needed to know. When he asked who had fitted the copper strip to the cedar plank, she kept her eyes on the road. My father, 7 years ago. He used square nails. That was what he had. Caleb nodded but offered no reason the detail mattered. The unanswered question rode with them into town. Mr. Hollister, the justice of the peace, kept 2 narrow rooms above a harness shop. He wore steel spectacles and read the proposed terms twice before looking over their rims at Viola. Miss Ames, I would speak with you alone. Caleb put on his hat. I'll wait outside. He left without asking what the justice intended to say. Mr. Hollister closed the door. How long have you known Mr. Driscoll? Since yesterday morning. That is not long. No. Has he threatened you? No. Has he promised to discharge your debt in return for marriage? No. Has he demanded an interest in Red Gate? No. Do you understand that a private agreement may show intention but cannot prevent every future dispute between husband and wife? Viola rested both hands on the document case. I understand paper does not make a decent man. Mr. Hollister removed his spectacles and polished them with a handkerchief. "And you still wish to proceed?" "I do." Caleb was called inside. The justice asked what property he brought to the marriage. "A gray gelding named Slate, 1 saddle, clothing, hand tools, and a little cash. Land, none. Cattle, any claim that Redgate was purchased or improved with your funds?" "No claim." Mr. Hollister read the inventory aloud. "Redgate Farm, 2 milk cows, 4 hogs, poultry, 1 mule team, implements, standing crop, cedar seed chest and contents, debt obligation due October 3rd. Caleb signed beneath a statement acknowledging that the listed property belonged to Viola before marriage. Mr. Hollister copied the terms onto a second sheet, then had both Viola and Caleb sign each version. He witnessed both copies and placed one before each of them. "Keep them separate," he said. "A promise is easier to remember when neither person controls the only paper." The ceremony took less time than the inventory. No flowers, no family, no promises beyond those the justice required. Caleb touched Viola's hand only when instructed. His grip was light, and he released it at once. When Mr. Hollister pronounced them husband and wife, Viola felt no sudden safety, only the weight of one door closing and another opening under terms she had chosen. Outside, Morton Pryce stood near the livery rail with Alden Rake beside him. Pryce's gaze dropped to Viola's document case, then moved to Caleb. "That was quick." Viola continued toward the wagon. Pryce stepped into the street. "Driscoll, is it? A saddle hand playing farmer now." Caleb stopped but did not approach him. "Mr. Pryce, knowing a rope does not teach a man planted ground." "That appears to be true." The answer denied Pryce the quarrel he had prepared. His mouth hardened. "A poor man marries valuable land. People may wonder what he intends to harvest." Viola turned before Caleb could answer. "You no longer have business with whom I marry. Your note remains my business until October 3rd. Water does not wait for October, neither do I." She climbed into the wagon. Caleb joined her, leaving Pryce in the street without threat or explanation. The drive home took longer because the sun had climbed, and the mules needed water halfway. Near Redgate, a crash sounded from the livestock lot. A young steer from a neighboring pasture had broken through a weak rail and was running along the potato rows with a shattered board dragging behind him. Caleb jumped down before the wagon fully stopped, but he did not throw his rope. "Which lot?" he called. Viola saw the steer's angle, the soft ground beyond the beans and the open gate at the east enclosure. "East lot. Keep him off the potatoes." Caleb ran wide instead of straight at the animal. He turned the steer at the irrigation cut, keeping the broken rail away from the crop. Viola reached the lot first and swung the gate open. When the steer tried to break past, Caleb's loop settled over its horns. One pull changed its direction. No shouting, no beating. The animal entered the enclosure, breathing hard but unharmed. Caleb removed the rope and checked its legs. No blood. Viola examined the edge of the row. 2 plants bent, none uprooted. "You asked where. It is your field." Most men would have chosen the nearest pen. The nearest pen was across your potatoes. He recoiled the rope. "I married a farmer this morning. I should listen when she tells me where the crop is." The words were not flirtation. He spoke as if listening were a skill he intended to practice. That evening, Viola showed him the bunkroom beside the barn. It held a narrow cot, a washstand, 1 wall peg, and a small iron stove that would need cleaning before winter. She placed a brass key on the washstand. "This opens the front and kitchen doors. It does not open my room. Understood. You may enter the house for meals and necessary work. Nothing else is assumed." Caleb stepped back from the key. "You decide which doors I use." Viola left it where it lay. At dusk, they walked to the head gate. Her father's copper strip and the newer iron brace still held the cedar plank together. The water did not. Caleb crouched several feet away, close enough to study the current, but not close enough to touch the board. "The loss is not happening here," he said. "You are certain?" "The gate is holding. The channel below it is taking what little enters." Viola watched the weak current slide beneath the double V notch. "Then where is it going?" Caleb looked upstream toward the dark line of cottonwoods and Granite Fork's higher ground. "Somewhere above Redgate, the ditch is being made to run another way." "Sua!" Caleb was right about the diversion. and wrong about the first board he set the next morning. He placed it across the lower bean lateral, where the ground still held dampness beneath the crust, and opened the weak flow toward the orchard. Viola came down from the potato rise carrying a hoe. Close that. Caleb put both hands on the board. The orchard leaves are curling. They curl by noon every dry August. She pointed uphill. Potatoes first, beans second. Orchard at dusk, when the roots keep what they receive. The slope fooled me. It fools men who think lower ground means greater need. He pulled the board, reset it where she directed, and waited while water spread into the first potato furrow. Show me the order again. Viola had expected defense. The absence of it left her with no quarrel to finish. Upper seed rows, market rows below them. Beans after noon if the flow holds. Orchard last. Caleb repeated the sequence. Seed, market, beans, orchard. And if the water drops, seed first. Everything else waits. He did not call the order wasteful because seed produced no October payment. He understood that a farm sold one harvest and survived on the next. Over the following days he learned red gate by correction, which cow kicked if approached from the right, which wagon wheel loosened after a mile, where the east flume settled in soft soil, which fence post only appeared sound because bindweed held it upright. He asked before moving boards and remembered the answers. When the ditch weakened, he carried water to the livestock instead of stealing an extra half hour from Thomas Venn's downstream turn. When Viola found him replacing a cracked support beneath the east flume, he had cut the pine to the old length and left it lying beside the channel. "Why haven't you set it?" she asked. "I don't know the fall." "You measured the old support. The old support has sunk." He handed her the level line. "You said half an inch could cost the orchard." Viola set the height. Caleb drove the support. The second blow sent a sharp stiffness through his left shoulder. His arm stopped above chest height. The hammer slipped from his hand and struck the bank. Viola caught the flume before it shifted. "Do not lift again. It will pass." That was not an answer. He flexed his fingers, but his shoulder remained drawn lower than the right. "A horse went down with me 2 years ago. Mountain trail. I caught the saddle instead of letting him roll." "Was it broken?" "No." "Dislocated?" The doctor in La Grande called it badly wrenched. "And you kept working." "I needed wages." Viola pushed the hammer toward his right hand. "Use this side. The right tires sooner. Then stop sooner." Caleb studied the support, not her face. "You are direct." "Pain does not improve because a man lies about it." He changed hands. The right-handed blows landed slower, but the support stayed true. By September 2nd, Red Gate had received less than half its ordinary flow for 4 straight days. Samuel Brody and Thomas Venn rode in from the lower farms near noon, both men carrying the anger of dry fields. Samuel dismounted beside the ditch and pointed at the faint current leaving Red Gate. "You have been holding water above your marker." Viola set down the basket of beans she had been sorting. "No, my lower pasture has not seen a proper turn since Monday." Thomas remained mounted. "My young orchard is drying from the east side. Then we measure what enters Red Gate and what leaves it." Samuel's jaw tightened. "You expect us to trust your marks?" "No, I expect you to make your own." She brought a tin pail, a pocket watch inherited from her father, and 2 willow sticks. At the head gate she marked the waterline before anyone touched a board. She had Samuel hold the pail beneath the inflow while Thomas watched the second hand. The weak stream took nearly twice the ordinary time to fill it. At the lower gate they repeated the test. The loss across Red Gate was small and accounted for by open furrows. Caleb stood near the fence with his hat pushed back, speaking only when Samuel asked who had controlled the boards that morning. "Mrs. Driscoll did. I carried them." Samuel glanced toward him. "You are her husband." "Yes, that makes you a poor witness." "Then use the marks you made yourself." No threat, no insult. Thomas dismounted at last and checked the lower stick. "She isn't keeping enough to explain what we are losing." "I told you that," Viola said. "Telling is not measuring," Samuel replied. "No." The answer took the heat out of him. Viola opened her ledger on the ditch bank. For 3 days, each farm records the time water reaches its upper and lower marks. No man adjusts a turn without another user present. Thomas frowned toward the potato rise. "Your crop is nearest failure." That does not make Samuel's pasture less his. She shortened Red Gate's afternoon turn by 20 minutes and wrote the change before both men. Samuel watched the water pass downstream. You will lose part of the market rows. I may. Price will not return the favor. Then the record should show which farm did. By sunset, Samuel had signed beneath the measurements. Thomas added his name after checking the marks once more. Caleb closed the upper board when Viola told him, and did not praise her where the men could hear. Later at the barn, he placed a cup of water beside the beans she had resumed sorting. You gave away 20 minutes. I passed on what was not mine, even if Price takes it above them. Especially then. Caleb leaned one shoulder against the post, keeping weight off the injured side. Your father teach you that. The ditch did. The next 2 days brought no improvement. Measurements from Samuel's pasture and Thomas's orchard confirmed that the largest loss began somewhere above Red Gate. Granite Fork refused to set public markers. Rake sent word that Price would not have cattle schedules dictated by vegetable farmers. Viola recorded the refusal beside the others. On September 4th, she and Caleb worked until evening, packing the bank below the potato rise. The sky over the blue mountains faded from copper to gray. Caleb closed the bean lateral in the correct order, then waited while Viola checked the last seed row. You remembered, she said. You corrected me once. Some men require more. Some men enjoy being corrected less than I do. You do not enjoy it. No. I enjoy not making the same mistake twice. At the head gate, the chain lay across the bank instead of around the cedar board. Viola stopped before stepping into the ditch. The fastening pin rested in the grass, its end bright where a tool had worried it free. No broken link, no shattered groove, no cedar plank. Water moved through the empty guides in a thin sheet, carrying mud toward the lower farms. Her father's copper strip was gone with the board. So were the 3 old nails, the iron reinforcement she had added the week before, and its 2 newer square heads. Caleb crouched beside the pin without touching it, worked loose with pliers or a narrow wrench. Not water, no, not cattle, no. Viola scanned the bank. A shallow scrape led away from the ditch, then disappeared where dry grass began. Whoever had taken the plank had known how to free it without breaking the chain, and how to carry 3 feet of wet cedar without leaving it nearby. Caleb rose slowly, his left shoulder stiff from the day's work. We should bring Samuel before anyone walks over the ground. We will. Viola faced him. But first you will answer what you refused to answer in my ditch. I told you what I knew. You told me a method. You recognized the work. Now the board is gone. I did not take it. That is not the question. The weak current hissed between the empty guides. Where did you see timber weaken so water would take the blame? Caleb's mouth hardened, not with anger, with decision held back. Viola picked up the loose chain and set it where no hoof could cross the scrape. You have until morning. After that, silence becomes its own answer. Sua. At sunrise, Caleb gave Viola an answer that was true and still not enough. He stood beside the empty headgate while Samuel Brody examined the tool marks on the fastening pin. I saw boards weakened on hired waterwork, Caleb said. Men cut where current would finish the break. Viola held the replacement plank against the guides. It was plain pine from beneath the lean-to, lighter than the stolen cedar and rough along one edge. Where was the work? More than one place. Was Granite Fork one of them? Caleb's jaw set. I won't give you a name I can't support. You were willing to give me a marriage without supporting all of yourself. Samuel glanced between them, but did not interrupt. Viola drove the replacement pin through the chain loop. You do not touch this gate alone. You do not walk upstream without telling me. You do not move a track, tool, or scrap, because you think it may help. Agreed. That is not trust, I know. It is permission to keep working while I decide what your silence means. Caleb accepted that too. The plain pine board slowed the weak water, enough to direct what remained, but it could not restore what vanished above Red Gate. From September 5th through the 7th, the measurements continued. Viola did not repeat the full bucket test each time. Samuel, Thomas Venn, and Lowell Pierce used the marked sticks already set at each upper and lower gate. They recorded arrival time, depth, and release time in Viola's ledger, then signed beside their own numbers. The pattern sharpened. Samuel's pasture lost some water through ordinary seepage. Thomas's orchard lost less. Lowell's lower field received barely enough to darken the first yard of ditch. The greater loss occurred before the current reached Red Gate. On the second morning, Lowell crouched beside Viola's upper marker and watched the line remain below his thumb. "I said you were holding it," he muttered. "You did. I was wrong." Viola turned the page. "Sign what you measured." Lowell took the pencil. "You do not want an apology. An apology will not move water." He signed. By noon, the three farms had a temporary rotation. Seed rows came first. Livestock water followed. Market crops divided what remained according to measured turns, not acreage or temper. No user changed a board without another present. Samuel began calling them the Willow Bend ditch users, half in irritation and half because the work required a name. The phrase stayed. Caleb carried boards, repaired stakes, and entered times only when Viola dictated them. When Thomas asked whether a husband ought to control his wife's gait, Caleb answered, "The person who knows the field controls the gate." Thomas gave Viola a sideways glance. "You taught him that fast. He made it easy by being wrong early." Caleb did not defend himself. The men laughed once, and the sound did more to alter the air around Viola than any declaration of loyalty could have done. Respect arrived disguised as ordinary work. Granite Fork refused every request to place a public marker above its cattle turn. On September 7th, Alden Rake sent a boy down the shared road with a message. Pryce would not have 3 vegetable farms dictate when his herd drank. Viola wrote the refusal in the ledger, including the boy's words and the hour delivered. Samuel signed as witness. "What does writing it change?" the boy asked. "Nothing today," Viola said. "That is why men count on nobody doing it." She sent him back with no insult for Pryce to use. That evening the water rose briefly, enough to fill the first potato lateral, then fell before Red Gate's recorded turn ended. Caleb stood on the bank, studying the interruption. A natural loss would not stop and start that clean. "A man-operated gate would," Viola said. Caleb's eyes moved toward Granite Fork's upper pasture. "Yes, you recognize that quickly." "I've worked diversions." "Where?" He lowered his gaze to the ledger in her hands. "I am not ready to answer that." Viola closed the book. "Then do not expect me to forget the question because you obeyed 3 days of instructions." "I don't." On September 8th, 2 harvestmen rode in from Baker City and asked for work. Viola showed them the crop, the sleeping space in the barn loft, and the written promise of payment after sale. Before either could answer, a Granite Fork hand appeared on the road and offered weekly cash, supper every night, and winter work if Pryce approved. One man removed his hat. "Mrs. Driscoll, I have children, then take the sure wage." The second shifted uneasily. "You're not angry? At men choosing coin they can carry home?" No. She did not ask them to gamble their families on her pride. They rode uphill with the Granite Fork hand. Caleb watched until the dust settled. "Pryce did not need 2 more men. He needed me to have 2 fewer. I can work longer. Your shoulder cannot. Then we lose part of the crop. Or we stop treating cash as the only thing people can trade." Viola opened the Willow Bend ledger to a clean page. By supper she had built an exchange. Caleb would repair Samuel's hayrack and reset 2 fence posts. In return, Samuel's household would send 3 workers for 1 harvest night. Viola would help Thomas and his daughters sort early apples for market. Thomas would bring sacks and 2 diggers. Red Gate would help Lowell clear a choked lateral before his next turn. Lowell and both sons would bring a wagon and lanterns when frost threatened. Every promise received a date and a mark. No charity, no debt of gratitude large enough to become control. Caleb read the page. "You made labor out of work none of them could finish alone." That is what a farm community is when men are not frightened of calling it one. And if they fail to come, then I will know before asking twice. Samuel arrived the next morning with the damaged hayrack. Caleb replaced the split reach using his right arm for the hammer and his legs for leverage. Viola helped fit the iron strap without taking the tool from him. By noon, the wagon rolled true. Samuel tested it twice, then made his mark beside the harvest agreement. "Pryce pays cash," he said. "You pay in work." Viola wiped sawdust from her sleeve. "Take whichever keeps your word cheapest," Samuel grunted. "My wife already chose." He drove away. That afternoon, Caleb walked the shared ditch road below Granite Fork's fence, while Viola checked the lower markers. He stopped near a patch of flattened bunch grass. A shallow groove crossed the dust, wide enough for the edge of a heavy board. It began near the ditch, followed the road uphill, and turned toward the upper pasture before vanishing beneath trampled ground. Caleb crouched but did not touch it. Viola. She came to his side. The groove was not new enough to hold sharp edges, yet damp cedar could have dragged there after the stop plank vanished. Caleb placed 3 small stones beside the mark, outside the fence line. So, we can find it again without scraping it. You remembered the rule, yes. Does this lead where you think it leads? Toward Granite Fork's north pasture. What is there? He rose, and the old hesitation returned. Ground I have not seen in 2 years. Hoofbeats approached from above. Rake came down the road alone and stopped on Granite Fork's side of the fence. His gaze went from the 3 stones to Caleb. Still measuring other men's work, Driscoll? Caleb stepped no closer. Shared ditch. Shared road. Not beyond that wire. Rake smiled without warmth. Mrs. Driscoll, you keep asking where your water went. Viola faced him. Do you have an answer? Ask your husband who cut the upper channel. He wheeled his horse before she could stop him and rode back toward Granite Fork. Viola waited until the hoofbeats faded. Then she turned to Caleb. There is no morning left for you to borrow. The 3 stones marked the drag groove at their feet. Above the fence lay an upper channel Caleb had never named, and the missing cedar plank had been carried in its direction. I worked above Granite Fork once, Caleb said. That is the truth inside Rake's accusation. Viola stood beside the 3 stones marking the drag groove. Once is not an account. No. Did you cut the upper channel? I worked on water ground. Near it. Near it or on it? Caleb drew a breath, then stopped himself from reaching for an answer he had not decided to give. I need to tell you the whole of it, not a piece shaped by Rake. You have had 12 days to choose the whole. Viola turned toward Red Gate. Until you do, you follow my rules. No upper road alone, no Granite Fork fence, no moved evidence, no private bargain with Pryce or Rake. Agreed. And you do not mistake continued work for trust. I won't. The answer followed her down the road, plain and insufficient. At first light on September 10th, 4 Granite Fork cattle came through Red Gate's upper pasture entrance. The gate itself had not broken. Its pin had been pulled and tossed into a patch of greasewood, leaving the rails free to swing under the weight of stock. Viola heard the cows before she saw them, hooves striking dry ground while one calf bawled against the wire. Caleb came from the barn with a rope, but stopped short of mounting Slate. Where do you want them? East paddock. Keep them off the potato rise. And the calf? Separate it if you can without driving the others harder. He moved wide using his body and the rope's loose line to turn the lead cow. No shouting. No snapping loop. Viola opened the paddock while Samuel Brody, riding up for the morning watermark, blocked the lower lane. 3 cows entered cleanly. The 4th hesitated, then followed. The calf remained near the fence, one hind leg caught where old wire had curled inward. Caleb crouched beyond its kicking range. Water and a cloth, he said, not the horse bucket. Viola brought clean pump water and a strip of linen from the barn. Caleb freed the wire with fence pliers, then waited until the calf settled before washing the shallow cut. It bled little. The animal bore weight when it stood. It will walk, he said. Granite Fork can claim accident, Samuel muttered. Viola crossed to the open gate. The fastening pin lay 6 feet away beneath a weed, bright scrape marks along one side. An accident does not throw iron uphill. Samuel dismounted. Boot mark beside the post. Viola saw the partial heel in the dust. Not enough for a name, enough for a record. She brought the ledger and wrote the date, hour, 4 cattle, removed pin, recovered pin location, calf injury, and names present. Samuel signed below her entry. Caleb did not touch the boot mark. We should reset the gate with a chain, he said, after Granite Fork takes its cattle back. Why wait? So they see the pin before we repair what they may deny was moved. Viola gave one nod. Good. Alden Rake arrived before noon with 2 hands. His gaze passed over the open gate, the marked heel print, and the calf's bandaged leg. Loose stock, he said. Removed pin, Viola answered. Your fence is old. The fence held. The gate was opened. Rake slid from the saddle and reached toward the recovered pin. Caleb stepped between him and the ground without raising his hands. "Leave it where she marked it." Rake's mouth bent. "Taking orders well, Driscoll. Better than I used to." "That's supposed to mean something." "Only that you are not touching her evidence." Rake's eyes hardened, but Samuel stood close enough to witness every move. Viola held out the written account. "Signed that the cattle were found on Red Gate ground and returned alive. I sign nothing for strays. Then they remain in the paddock until Morton Pryce sends a man willing to collect them under witness." The two granite fork hands shifted uneasily. One glanced toward the calf. Rake took the pencil, made his mark, and shoved the ledger back. "You are building a wall of paper around a dry ditch. Paper lasts longer than your version of a morning." Rake motioned his men toward the cattle. Before mounting, he said to Caleb, "Tell her who first taught you to read a fall line." Caleb did not answer. Rake rode away with the herd. The calf limped once, then followed. September 11th and 12th passed under guarded turns. Samuel watched the upper road at dawn. Thomas Venn took midday. Lowell Pierce's sons reset the pasture gate with a short chain, and a new pin Viola issued from the toolbox. Water remained low but steady enough to preserve the seed rows. No new board appeared. No fresh track crossed the marked groove. Caleb worked within the limits Viola had set. He repaired Samuel's hayrack, reset Thomas's broken orchard brace, and returned to the bunk room each night without asking whether the house key on the washstand meant more than access to meals. On September 13th, Viola found him in the dry room beside the cedar seed chest. He had not opened it. A small pile of tools rested on a folded sack near his knee. "The latch is slipping," he said. "I noticed yesterday. You did not touch it. You said the contents were yours to decide. The latch is outside. The lid is attached to it." Viola set down the basket she carried. "What do you need?" "Permission to reset the screws and fit a backing plate. Nothing inside." "And the handle?" "Still loose." "Can you tighten it?" "I can, but one handle carries all the strain." He indicated the empty far side. "Cedar is sound enough for another." Viola studied the chest. Her mother had once lifted it with both arms beneath the bottom because the iron grip tore at the hand. "Wooden handle," she said. "Not iron. Iron will split the side if the chest is full." "Agreed." Caleb worked without opening the lid. He braced the crooked latch from outside, drove shorter screws through a thin plate, then shaped a wooden handle from seasoned ash. His left shoulder stiffened when he raised the auger. Viola took the chest's weight while he changed to his right hand. He did not protest. When the new handle sat firm, Caleb rose. "We should test it empty first." "It is not empty." "Then we test it as it stands." Viola took the old iron handle. Caleb took the new wooden one. "Lift on 3, she said. The chest came up evenly from the stone blocks. Caleb's right side bore more of his share. Viola shifted until neither handle twisted. They set it down without jar. "Better," he said. "Important weight should not depend on one hand." Viola kept her fingers around the old iron. "Neither should a marriage." Caleb's face tightened, not from the shoulder. "No." Hoof leather scraped outside the dry room door. Rake stood in the barn aisle, one shoulder against the frame. Viola released the handle and stepped between him and the chest. "You were not invited onto Red Gate. I came to collect a message Pryce sent, then deliver it from the yard." Rake ignored her and addressed Caleb. "You going to keep letting her think you only saw a few cut boards?" Caleb's posture went still. "Leave." "You took Granite Fork pay," Rake continued. "You helped grade the overflow above the north pasture." Ezra Latham checked the fall. "Pryce set the first stakes. I carried the tools." Viola did not turn toward Caleb. "Is that true?" Rake smiled as if he had placed a knife where neither of them could reach it. "Ask him how many days he worked there." "Get off my land," Viola said. "You have what you came for." Rake tipped his hat and backed into the aisle. "No, Mom, I think you do." He mounted and rode toward the upper road. The barn settled around the fading hoofbeats. Viola turned to Caleb at last. One hand remained on the chest's old iron grip. The other closed around the wooden handle he had made. "Now tell me what you helped him build." "Sewer, an overflow cut," Caleb said, "above Willow Bend behind Granite Fork's north pasture." Viola kept one hand on each handle of the cedar seed chest. The old iron was cold beneath her left palm. The new ash grip was smooth beneath her right. Start before Pryce's stakes. Caleb stood across the dry room with his tools still laid on the folded sack. 2 years ago, Granite Fork hired 6 men for upper water work. Pryce said spring runoff was cutting his low pasture, and he wanted an overflow channel to carry the excess toward his stock pond. Who hired you? Pryce spoke the terms. Rake kept the time. How long? 9 days. Ezra Latham? He checked the fall and marked the grade. I cut the upper bank and set 2 lower supports. The others cleared brush and moved spoil. Viola released the wooden handle but kept her fingers around the iron. Was there a gate? No. Posts? Not across the main channel. Guides for a board? No. A side opening low enough to take an ordinary August turn? No. The mouth sat above summer water. Spring runoff could enter. A normal turn could not. Caleb did not move closer. If someone lowered that mouth, added uprights across Willow Bend, and set a gate in the main channel, the current could be forced sideways. How much? Most of it depending on the board height. Could my cedar plank fit? I don't know the frame. I know the plank is near the width a man would choose. Viola's grip tightened around the old handle. And you knew all this when you rode through my gate. I knew the old cut existed. That was not my question. I suspected it had been altered. When? Before I reached Red Gate. The answer landed without ornament. Viola let it remain between them. How I heard in Baker City that farms below Granite Fork were losing water in clean intervals, not seepage, not a broken bank. Phelps said Redgate had lost hands and might need a man who could work stock and timber. I remembered the overflow. I came to see whether the two were connected. You came for the ditch. In part. And asked for work because it placed you near it. Yes. Then I offered marriage. Caleb's jaw tightened. You saw the weak flow. You saw the saw cut. You heard Pryce held the note. You let me take you to a justice, without saying why you had chosen this farm. Yes. Did you know about the note before you arrived? No. I knew Pryce had been buying small obligations around Baker City. I did not know he held yours until you told me. Did you know about his proposal? No. Did you know he wanted the South Lane? No. But you knew enough to believe my water trouble might lead to work you helped begin. Yes. Viola released the iron handle. You decided that truth could wait. I told myself I needed proof before I accused Pryce. You did not need to accuse him. You needed to tell me where your suspicion came from. I know that now. You knew it then. Caleb's eyes remained on her. I knew honesty was owed. I convinced myself an unfinished suspicion was different from a fact. Because if you told me, I might have sent you away. Yes, so you used my need to keep access to the ground. Yes, the single word did not defend him. That made it harder to strike against and no easier to forgive. Viola crossed the narrow room and closed the toolbox with her foot. Mr. Hollister asked whether my choice was free. Caleb's face lost color beneath the dust. I remember. I answered with less truth than you had. I should have told you before the justice asked that question. You should have told me before I opened the gate. Yes. Work does not pay for that. No. The repaired flume does not. No. The calf, the hay rack, the measurements, this handle, none of them buy back the part of my choice you took. Caleb lowered his gaze to the tools. I know. Do not say you know unless you can tell me what you took. He lifted his head again. The right to decide whether your need was worth tying your name to a man connected to Pryce's ground. Viola felt the answer in the set of her shoulders, not as relief but as proof that he had finally named the injury without reducing it. You are still my husband under the law. Yes. You are still bound by the work agreement. Yes. That does not place you beside me as before. I understand. Then hear the new terms. You do not approach the upper channel alone. You do not cross Granite Fork's fence. You do not move a board, pin, print, stone, or scrap connected to this ditch without a witness. You tell me before you act against Pryce or Rake. You sleep in the bunk room. The house key stays on the washstand unless the farm requires you inside. Agreed. You continue harvest work because Red Gate still needs the labor you promised. Do not mistake necessity for forgiveness. I won't. And tonight you will tell Samuel Brody and Thomas Venn what concerns the ditch. Not our private terms, not the bedroom key, the work, the original cut, and what was absent when you left it. I will. Viola moved the cedar seat back against the wall with both handles, lifting her side before Caleb could offer. He waited until she nodded, then took the wooden grip. Together they set it square on the stone blocks. The chest remained closed, so did the distance between them. At sunset, Samuel and Thomas came to Red Gate after their final water checks. Viola seated them at the kitchen table with the Willow Bend ledger open. Caleb remained standing near the door until she told him to sit. He gave the account without trimming his roll. Pryce set the stakes. Ezra checked the fall. Caleb cut the bank and set lower supports. Rake kept other workers away from the upper bend. No gate existed. No frame crossed the main ditch. Ordinary summer flow could not enter the overflow. Samuel's fingers stopped tapping the table. "You thought that cut was taking our water before you married her?" "I thought it might be." "And said nothing?" "Yes." Thomas studied Viola rather than Caleb. "You want him gone?" "That is not tonight's question." Her voice held steady. "Tonight's question is whether the three of us can find the alteration without trespass, accusation, or destroyed evidence." Samuel turned back to Caleb. "Where does Ezra live now?" 17 miles east, near the old mill road. "Bring him tomorrow." Caleb did not answer Samuel. He waited. Viola noticed the choice. "Not at dawn," she said. "First, we learn whether someone is watching the channel." Thomas frowned. "How?" "We keep the ordinary turn. We leave the upper road empty. We watch from Red Gate." They agreed on positions. Samuel would take the lower cottonwoods. Thomas would remain near the orchard bend. Caleb would stay by the barn unless Viola called him. No one would ride toward Granite Fork. Darkness settled over Baker Valley without moonlight. The plain pine replacement board held the weak current beneath the headgate. Viola stood in the ditch shadow with the ledger tucked under one arm. Samuel was a darker shape among the cottonwoods. Thomas waited beyond the orchard fence. Caleb remained beside the barn, far enough from Slate that reaching the saddle would require a visible choice. Near midnight, a shielded lantern appeared above the upper pasture. One narrow blade of yellow light crossed the brush, vanished, then returned farther left near the old overflow line. Someone paused there, long enough to open or inspect a covered mechanism. Caleb took one step toward Slate, then he stopped. "Mrs. Driscoll," he called across the yard. "Someone is at the channel." Viola did not turn from the distant light. "Do not follow." "I won't." The lantern disappeared behind the cottonwoods. No hoofbeats followed. No rider crossed the shared road. Whoever had altered Willow Bend knew the hidden channel might be found, and now that person knew Red Gate had begun watching back. Sua. The lantern had answered the question Viola meant to settle before sending Caleb anywhere. Someone was watching the upper channel, and waiting another day would give that person time to move whatever lay behind the brush. Before dawn on September 14th, Viola spread Ezra Latham's name, the ditch sketch, and a clean sheet of paper across the kitchen table. Caleb stood opposite her in his work coat. He had not slept. Neither had she. "You ride east at first light," she said. 17 miles to Ezra's place near the old mill road. "Alone?" "Yes." "Samuel and Thomas stay here?" "Samuel takes the upper watch until noon. Thomas takes it after. Lowell's sons finish the lower fence and keep the shared road in sight." Viola wrote while she spoke. "You bring Ezra back. Thomas and Lowell will meet you near the orchard road on your return, so Ezra speaks before ditch witnesses." Caleb glanced toward the dark window. "Pryce may send riders. You do not confront them." "Agreed." "You do not inspect the upper channel on the way." "Agreed." "You do not cross Granite Fork's fence." "Agreed." She folded the paper once. "Slate rests 2 hours at Ezra's place." "Not 1 hour and 50 minutes, because you think sunset matters more than the horse." 2 hours. You return before sunset." Caleb's gaze held hers. Before sunset. That was the promise. Not that he would find proof. Not that he would persuade Ezra. Only that he would obey the limits and come back when she had asked. Viola sealed the note with plain wax and slid it across the table. "Leave the revolver. I was not planning to use it. Then it will not be missed." Caleb removed the holster from his belt and laid it beside the stove. He took only a water bag, oats for Slate, 1 blanket, and the written request. At the barn, he tightened the saddle with his right hand while protecting the stiff left shoulder. Viola watched from the yard without offering help he had not requested. Before mounting, he said, If Ezra refuses, bring me the refusal in his own words. If he agrees but needs time, tell him the water may be moved before tomorrow. If Granite Fork blocks the public road, turn back. Do not trade a witness for a quarrel." Caleb nodded. Then he rode east as the first gray light touched Baker Valley. The absence he left behind was practical at first. Slate's rail stood empty. No hammer sounded from the east flume. No one crossed the yard asking which board Viola wanted moved. She refused to turn the absence into waiting. Samuel arrived before sunrise and took position among the lower cottonwoods, where he could see both the ditch road and upper pasture entrance. Viola opened Red Gate's weak turn, measured the rise against the marked stick, and sent the first water into the seed rows. When the line reached the proper depth, she closed it and passed the remainder downstream. Samuel came from the trees. "You could have kept another 10 minutes. It belongs to Thomas. Your potatoes need it. So do his trees. Pryce counts on that." Viola entered the time in the ledger. "Then he counts on me remaining honest while he is not. That is his mistake." By mid-morning, Thomas arrived to take the watch. Lowell's older son repaired the lower fence with a new pin Viola issued from the toolbox. His younger brother carried messages between the fields. No one wandered near Granite Fork. No one touched the 3 stones marking the drag groove. Near noon, a rider wearing Granite Fork colors came down the shared road. He was young enough that his beard had not filled along the jaw. He stopped outside Red Gate and recited his message without dismounting. "Mr. Pryce says bringing outsiders to inspect his pasture will be treated as hostility." Viola stood beside the pump with a bucket in one hand. "No one is inspecting his pasture today. He says the upper ditch is Granite Fork business. Willow Bend is shared business." The rider shifted in the saddle. "He says Ezra Latham has no claim there. Ezra worked the original overflow. Shared users may ask what he built. Mr. Pryce won't permit trespass. Neither will I." Viola set the bucket on the stone lip. "Tell him we will measure shared water from shared ground." The young man looked toward the empty hitch rail. Rake saw Driscoll on the mill road. Then Rake is watching a man who has not crossed Granite Fork land. "That all?" "That is enough." The rider left without threat because Viola had given him none to carry back. Thomas emerged from the orchard fence after the hoofbeats faded. "You think they will try to stop Caleb?" "They may." Samuel could ride after him. "No, why?" Viola picked up the bucket. "Because Caleb was given a road, a return time, and the freedom to turn back. Sending a second man would mean I did not believe he could keep any of them." The afternoon wore down under a pale sky. Viola sorted dry bean pods for seed, checked the market sacks, and repaired one split wagon sideboard with Lowell's younger son. Each task ended with her eyes moving east before she could prevent it. A freight wagon appeared and passed. Then 2 boys driving milk cows. A lone horseman came as far as Thomas's orchard road and turned south. Not Caleb. The sun lowered toward the blue mountains. Samuel returned from his farm. Lowell and his older son rode to the meeting point near the orchard lane. Thomas stayed beside Viola at the Red Gate. 17 miles is a long ride, he said. He knew the distance. The old mill road has washouts. He knew the road. Thomas folded his arms. "You are determined not to excuse him before he fails. I am determined not to decide he failed before the time he gave me." The sun touched the western edge of the valley. A thin band of gold remained across the upper rail. Hoofbeats carried from the east. One rider appeared, then another. At the orchard road, 2 more joined them. Slate came at a steady walk, tired enough to carry his head lower but sound in every step. Caleb did not push him into a trot for the last distance. A lean man with gray beginning at his temples rode beside him. Lowell and his older son followed, with Thomas mounting to accompany them through the final gate. Caleb crossed into Red Gate while sunlight still lay on the top rail. He dismounted stiffly, loosened Slate's girth, and offered the gelding a measured drink. After a pause, he gave him more. He rubbed the horse down, checked all 4 legs, and set Oats within reach. Only then did he come to Viola. Dust coated his sleeves. His left shoulder hung lower from the ride. "Ezra agreed," he said. "Slate rested 2 full hours. We stayed on the public road. No one stopped us." Viola glanced at the last light on the gate. "You came back. You asked me to. He did not add what the trip had cost or ask what the return earned. One promise kept, nothing more, nothing less. Ezra removed his hat. Mrs. Driscoll, Caleb says Willow Bend is losing water in clean intervals and gaining it in pulses. That is what our marks show. Viola opened the ledger on the fence rail. Samuel, Thomas, and Lowell gathered close enough to hear. Tell us what you built. Ezra drew a line in the dust with the toe of his boot. The original overflow began above ordinary summer flow. Spring runoff could spill into it and carry toward Granite Fork's low pond. There was no upright frame across Willow Bend, no guide slots, no gate, no retaining pin. Could the cut take an August turn as you left it? Viola asked. Not without water higher than any normal turn. Could someone make it take one? Lower the mouth, set posts across the main ditch, fit a board in guides, hold the board high for some water, low for more. Could my cedar, stop plank fit such a frame? Ezra glanced toward the empty guides at Red Gate. If it is close to 3 feet, yes. But only the frame will tell us whether it was built for that board. Caleb did not help Ezra answer. He stood beyond the circle, letting Viola direct the questions. Can the alteration be seen from the shared maintenance path? She asked. Part of the bend can, Ezra said. Brush may hide the rest. And from outside Granite Fork's fence, enough to establish whether new posts exist. Not enough to touch them. Samuel frowned. They could dismantle it tonight. They could, Viola said. But the first man who crosses private wire gives Pryce a cleaner story than the stolen water. Ezra nodded. Then measure, watch, and bring enough witnesses that refusal becomes evidence. The temperature fell after midnight. By dawn, a thin rim of ice circled the pump bucket. It melted when sunlight reached the yard, but Viola marked the date beside the water figures. September 15th. 8 days remained before the hard frost would come. 8 days to guard the ditch, prepare the harvest, and find a hidden gate that someone upstream already knew they were seeking. Sua. The frost warning gave Viola 8 days, and she used every one of them. From September 15th through the 22nd, Red Gate became a place of measured hours. Samuel Brody watched the upper road at dawn. Thomas Venn took midday. Lowell Pierce and his sons repaired the lower fence, cleared the wagon path, and marked the soft places where loaded wheels might sink. Ezra stayed through 2 water turns, then rode home with instructions to return if the flow began rising and falling without a scheduled change. Viola graded empty sacks beneath the barn roof, checked the potato lifter, and counted lanterns. Caleb repaired the low wagon, sharpened digging forks, and worked within the boundaries she had set. He did not approach the upper channel. He did not cross Granite Fork's wire. The general house key remained on the bunkroom washstand. Each night he entered the kitchen only when supper was ready or farm business required him. Each morning he asked which work mattered first. Trust did not return as a feeling. It formed as a record. A board left where Viola placed it. A route followed. A gate checked before sleep. A promise kept without asking what it earned. On the afternoon of September 23rd, the wind turned north. It moved across Baker Valley with no scent of rain, only the dry edge of cold descending from the Blue Mountains. Viola crushed a potato leaf between her fingers. The green tissue had gone limp before sunset. Tonight, she said. Caleb stood at the end of the row with a shovel in his right hand. How much can we save? Enough for seed. Enough for the note if the labor exchange holds. And if it doesn't, then I choose which rows live. Viola sent Lowell's younger son with written messages. Samuel was to bring lanterns and forks. Thomas would bring sacks and both daughters. Lowell's family would handle wagons and loading. Ezra was asked to watch Willow Bend while the others worked. No message begged. Every name stood beside work Red Gate had already given. Caleb started toward the mule team. Viola stopped him. The mules pull loaded wagons. Slate takes the lifter. Caleb glanced at the gray gelding. He has never worked behind iron. Then do not hitch him as if he has. Caleb led Slate around the lifter twice, allowing him to smell the frame and hear the blade scrape. The gelding stepped sideways when the wheel turned, then settled under Caleb's hand. Depth? Caleb asked. Viola crouched beside the lever. Shallow on the first rise. Lower 1 notch after the soft ground. If the wheel sinks, stop. Do not pull harder. First row, the short one by the barn. If we make a mistake, we lose less. By dark, wagons rolled through the red gate. Samuel brought his wife and 3 lanterns. Thomas arrived with his daughters, rope, and clean sacking. Lowell came with both sons and more empty sacks than Viola expected. Ezra rode in last, his coat buttoned high. "The flow dropped at my place near sundown," he said. Then rose a finger without anyone changing a turn. Viola pointed toward the headgate. "Watch the marked stick. Call me if it moves faster than a scheduled release." She divided the field into lines. Lanterns hung low from stakes so the light fell across the soil instead of into the digger's eyes. Samuel's family took the west rows. Thomas and his daughters worked the middle. Lowell's sons loaded and marked market sacks. Viola kept the seed rows nearest the barn under her own direction. Caleb brought Slate to the lifter. "Forward," Viola said. The traces tightened. Iron scraped beneath the first hill and exposed only loose dirt. "Stop!" Caleb stopped at once. Viola lowered the blade 1 notch again. This time, potatoes rolled into lantern light, dark with soil and uncut. Helen Brody gave a brief cheer from the sack line. Viola did not. 1 clean row was evidence, not rescue. Caleb guided Slate into the next pass. At the rise, he waited. "Half a notch?" "Yes." He changed it before the blade climbed. Row by row, they found a rhythm. Slow near stones, lift at turns, hold when the left wheel entered softer ground. Caleb did not guess when he forgot, he asked. Viola answered. The cold deepened until breath showed white and frost silvered the wagon rails. Her fingers lost feeling first. She pressed them against her skirt between rows and continued. Near midnight, the blade struck buried stone. Metal snapped beneath the frame. Slate jumped sideways. Caleb loosened pressure instead of hauling the reins. "Stand," he said. The gelding stopped, trembling but sound. Viola dropped beside the wheel. The retaining pin had sheared through the narrow housing. Samuel brought a wagon bolt, too long. Lowell opened his nail keg, too thin. Viola searched the repair box and found a bent iron staple. Straighten this, wrap the narrow end in harness leather. Wedge the far side with hardwood. Caleb took the staple. "Will it hold?" "If you stop before the blade locks, then call every stop." He set the iron against a flat stone and struck it with the back of the hatchet. His left shoulder tightened when he steadied the piece. Viola took the leather strip from him. "Right arm, I know, then obey before I repeat it." He changed his grip. Together they fitted the staple through the broken housing and drove a cedar wedge behind it. The repair sat crooked. It held. They returned to the rows. No one paused to admire the work. The frost did not. By 2 in the morning, sound market sacks lined the barn wall. Damaged potatoes went into separate baskets. Viola brought the low wagon to the dry room and opened the cedar seed chest herself. Caleb stood at the new wooden handle without touching it. "Ready?" he asked. Viola took the original iron grip. Lift. The chest rose evenly between them. His right side accepted more weight. She adjusted until neither handle twisted. They carried it to the wagon, where Helen had spread clean sacking. Viola selected every seed potato herself. Sound skin, strong eyes, no cut from the blade, no softness beneath the thumb. Caleb brought baskets, removed rejects, and never reached inside the chest. Near dawn, the final seed row remained beneath a white crust of frost. Caleb guided Slate into place. 2 inches lower until the stony patch, he said. Then raise. Viola gave 1 nod. He remembered. The lifter entered the cold ground. Potatoes broke through the crust, and tired hands gathered them without celebration. When the last seed basket went into the chest, Viola counted twice before closing the lid. Enough to plant, enough market crop to bargain with. Not plenty, enough. Caleb loosened Slate's traces before tending his own shoulder. Viola carried him a tin cup of coffee from the kitchen. He accepted it with both hands around the warmth. "You followed every row," she said. "You knew where they went. You could have taken over when the pin broke. Strength was not the missing tool." He drank once and handed the cup back. "I am trying to remember that before you have to say it." The answer did not restore what he had withheld. It did add another line to the record. After the market sacks were moved beneath the barn roof, Viola and Caleb lifted the cedar seed chest from the wagon by its 2 handles and returned it to the dry room. They set it on the stone blocks. Viola checked the latch. Closed. Dry, safe. She changed her wet skirt, warmed her hands at the stove, and rested only long enough for pain to return to her fingers. Then Ezra called from the headgate. Water climbed the marked stick in a sudden rush, paused, fell half an inch, then surged higher. Mud and broken reeds rode the current. Caleb joined them but did not touch the plain pine board. "A gate is being worked," Ezra said. Held partway, then moved. Viola watched the water rise beyond the previous mark. After weeks of taking too much from Red Gate, someone was now sending too much toward it. Fresh cattle and horse tracks crossed the frosted ground near the upper boundary. They did not enter her field, not yet. But one set of boot marks pointed toward the hidden bend, where another hand was making Willow Bend obey. Suah! The cattle crossed the cut wire before sunrise on September 25th. Viola heard iron drag against a post, then the heavy rush of hooves over ground still white with frost. She reached the yard with her boots unlaced, and her work coat thrown over her nightdress. Caleb came from the barn carrying a rope, but he stopped before reaching Slate. Nearly 20 Granite Fork cattle had entered through the upper pasture and were spreading toward the harvested potato rows. A mounted rider turned away along the shared ditch road. "Do not follow him," Viola said. Caleb's hand tightened around the rope. "Where do you want the cattle?" "Bare strip beside the ditch. Then the side paddock. Keep every hoof away from the opening." He ran wide around the herd instead of charging through it. Slate remained at the rail. Viola opened the paddock gate and struck a feed pan against the post. The lead cows turned toward the sound. One steer broke toward the barn. Caleb waited for her direction. She pointed left. "Turn him at the dry lateral." The rope stayed coiled. Caleb used his position and voice to push the steer back toward the herd. By the time Samuel Brody rode up for the morning watermark, every animal stood inside the paddock. Viola led him to the upper fence. The wire had not sagged or snapped. Both strands ended in bright, clean cuts between two posts. Hoofprints entered from Granite Fork's side in a broad, churned line. One shod horse had followed the shared road to the opening and turned uphill. No return tracks crossed the gap. "Nobody steps closer," Viola said. "Samuel, stand where you are. Caleb, keep off the frost. Send Lowell's younger boy for Thomas and Ezra." Caleb took the lower lane on the bay mule rather than tire Slate after the frost harvest. Viola placed 2 empty sacks several feet from the clearest marks so no one would cross them by mistake. She touched neither wire nor print. The cold from her damp hem climbed above her knees. But she opened the ledger on a fence rail and wrote the date, hour, number of cattle, cut wire, track direction, and names present. Samuel signed. "Now change those clothes," he said. After the first account, "You have it." Viola closed the ledger. "Then I will." She returned within 10 minutes in dry work clothes, carrying coffee in a tin cup. She drank half before Thomas and Ezra arrived with Caleb. Lowell followed soon after. Each man walked the outside edge and named only what he could see. Thomas found a square heel mark beside the nearest post. Ezra measured the cut height against his hand. Caleb studied the horse track. "Common ranch shoe," he said. "Can you tell whose?" Viola asked. "No." "Then common ranch shoe is all we write." Granite Fork sent 3 hands near noon. Their range boss claimed the cattle had found weak wire. Viola held the account at her side. "The wire was cut. Your cattle entered from your ground. They leave after one of you signs that they were found inside Red Gate. Mr. Pryce will not sign blame for strays. I did not ask for blame. I asked for a fact." Samuel remained beside the tracks. Thomas stood near the severed ends. Ezra watched the opening. The range boss finally made his mark beneath Viola's words. She gave him a written notice of fence damage and possible crop loss, then opened the paddock. Caleb did not ride with the Granite Fork men. He stayed beside the marked ground until the last cow left by the bare lane. "You wanted that rider," Viola said after the dust settled. "Yes. Why did you stop?" "Because a chase would destroy more truth than it found." "That was one reason." Caleb met her gaze. "You told me not to go." Viola folded the signed account. Good. It did not erase his old deception. It proved he had learned where obedience mattered. By the evening of September 26, the Willow Bend ditch users crowded around Viola's kitchen table. Measurement sheets lay beside Ezra's sketch of the original overflow, the cattle account, and a clean page for the inspection plan. Viola remained standing at the head of the table. We go up the shared maintenance path on the 28th. No one enters Granite Fork's cattle pens. No one crosses private wire. Lowell rubbed his thumb along the table edge. Pryce may say the path is his. Then he can say it before the ditch users and the sheriff's deputy. The deputy settles nothing about water, Ezra said. He keeps men from fighting, Viola replied. That is all we ask. She pointed to the next line. If we find a board, pin, post, or tool, nobody moves it until each witness has seen where it sits. Samuel and Thomas watch the wrapping. Ezra keeps it locked overnight. The next morning, he gives the physical object to the deputy sheriff. The county clerk receives our statements, your sketch, and a written description of whatever we found. Ezra nodded. My tool shed has a sound lock. If the gate releases a full head, Caleb said, the ditch road may flood before we reach Red Gate. He traced the short farm lane from the upper bend to the east pasture. This route is faster. Viola considered the grade. You and I take it. Thomas stays at the mechanism. Samuel warns every farm below. Lowell remains with the deputy. She added 2 more assignments. Samuel's oldest son would stay at Red Gate's east flume. Thomas's older daughter would watch the barn, the sacks, and the livestock. No one would appear by chance when the water rose. On September 27th, Viola wrote 2 letters. Lowell's older son carried them to Baker City on a rested horse. One asked the produce buyer to inspect Red Gate's graded potatoes on October 2nd. The other asked the bank whether Morton Pryce had lodged the original crop note for collection, and what sum would discharge it. The boy returned before dark with 2 folded replies. The buyer confirmed the appointment. The bank stated that Pryce had placed the original note in its hands, and that payment could be made there before the October 3rd deadline. Viola read both letters twice, then locked them with her retained debt statement. The road to freedom now existed in writing. Morton Pryce arrived before supper. He came alone and stopped outside the closed Red Gate. Caleb remained near the barn, within hearing but far enough away that Pryce could not claim he was being threatened. Viola met Pryce at the fence. Your cattle damaged my wire, she said. Stock cross weak boundaries. Pliers do not. Pryce ignored the signed account in her hand. I hear you intend to bring a deputy onto Granite Fork. Onto the shared maintenance path. Send Driscoll away. Give me the south lane through winter. I will see that Willow Bend runs full to Red Gate and your note can wait until spring. Viola rested one hand on the gate latch. You keep offering control over water you say you do not control. I offer influence. You offer my own survival back to me with your fist closed around it. October 3rd is close. The buyer comes October 2nd. Pryce's gaze moved toward Caleb. A saddle man leaves when the work is done. Then whether he stays will be his choice, not yours. Pryce turned the bay uphill. Tomorrow you may find shared ground harder to define than you think. Bring witnesses, Viola said. I am bringing mine. After he rode away, Caleb crossed the yard and stopped several feet from her. Where do you want me tomorrow? The old answer would have placed him wherever danger seemed greatest. Viola gave him the answer he had earned. Beside me, not ahead of me. Caleb nodded. Beside you. Before dawn on September 28th, Willow Bend began striking the plain pine board in heavy, uneven blows. The water fell between each surge, then returned higher, making the east flume shudder against its supports. Ezra came running from the ditch road with his coat unbuttoned. The hidden gate is being worked, he said. Above Red Gate, someone had begun moving the evidence before the witnesses could reach it. Sua. The next surge struck Red Gate hard enough to throw muddy water over the bank, but Viola did not stop to save the plain pine board. We leave now, she said. Samuel, warned Thomas and Lowell. Ezra, bring your sketch, Caleb, saddle slate, and the bay mule. The sheriff's deputy meets us at the lower bend. Caleb moved at once, but he did not ride ahead. By the time gray light reached the valley floor, 7 riders followed Willow Bend's shared maintenance path above Red Gate. Viola led. Caleb kept Slate beside her, half a length back whenever the bank narrowed. Behind them came Ezra, Samuel, Thomas, Lowell, and the deputy sheriff, a broad man in a wool coat who had already made his duty plain. He would keep the peace. He would not decide who owned water. The ditch ran high against its banks. rising in hard bursts and dropping enough between them to expose a wet brown line along the mud. "A gate is being held partway," Ezra said, then moved. "Can they wash the path out before we reach the bend?" Lowell asked. "If they release the full head," Viola answered. "That is why no one crowds the bank." At the turn behind Granite Fork's north pasture, green-cut brush had been stacked shoulder-high against the channel. Dust covered the outer branches. The inner leaves were still moist. Viola raised one hand, and the riders stopped. "No one touches it." They dismounted on the roadside. Samuel opened the ledger across his saddle. Thomas found fresh boot marks leading from the brush to the ditch. Lowell pointed out 2 willow stems cut low to clear working space. Ezra studied the bank without crossing the water. "This bend was open when we worked it." The deputy crouched beside a print. "Square heel, another worn down on the outside." "Write only what is visible," Viola said. Samuel recorded the brush, prints, water level, worked earth, and the hour. Each witness gave his own observation before the first branch moved. Only then did Viola allow the men to pull the screen apart. The hidden gate stood behind it. 2 heavy posts had been sunk across the main channel. Fresh-cut guides ran down their inner faces. To the left, the old overflow curved toward Granite Fork's low pond, its mouth cut lower than the line on Ezra's sketch. Across Willow Bend, a red cedar board sat trapped in the new frame, half raised. An iron retaining pin through the upper notch held it while water hammered beneath. Viola recognized the double V before the whole plank came into view. Her father's copper strip crossed the old split. 3 blackened square nails held it. Lower down, the iron reinforcement she had added on August 28th covered the pale saw cut, fixed by 2 newer nail heads. Pressure had spread the cut farther through the cedar. "That is Redgate's stop plank," she said. Her voice carried across the ditch without rising. Ezra stepped closer but did not touch the frame. "And none of this was here when Caleb and I finished the overflow. No posts across Willow Bend, no guides, no retaining pin. The side mouth sat above ordinary summer flow." Thomas pointed toward the branch channel. "With the board half raised, part of the water stays in Willow Bend, and part turns toward the pond." "And every adjustment makes the pulses," Ezra said. Caleb stood several feet from Viola, stripped of any place to hide. "I graded the original overflow," he said. "I cut part of the bank and set 2 lower supports. I did not build this gate. I suspected the old cut had been altered, and I concealed that connection from my wife before we married." Samuel's pencil paused. "You want that written?" "Yes." Caleb faced the witnesses rather than Viola. "Write that I withheld it before the justice asked whether her choice was free." Hoofbeats came from the upper road. Morton Pryce and Alden Rake emerged from the cottonwoods with 4 Granite Fork riders behind them. Pryce stopped outside the maintenance path. "You are trespassing. We are on Willow Bend's shared bank," Viola said, "and looking at my stolen plank in a concealed diversion gate." Pryce's eyes moved to the cedar board, then to Caleb. "Convenient. The man who built the channel finds the evidence." "He did not find it alone," Thomas said. "Every man here saw where the board sat." Pryce turned toward the deputy sheriff. "Remove them. Nobody moves until the witnesses finish," the deputy said. "I am not settling your water dispute. That gate is Granite Fork property. Then you can state that without touching it." Samuel resumed writing. Ezra described the original grade. Viola named each identifying mark: copper strip, 3 old nails, iron brace, 2 newer nails, fresh saw cut. Plain facts narrowed Pryce's room with every word. "That board could have been planted last night," he said. Ezra pointed to the weathering on the new posts. "Then explain why those have carried water longer than a night." Rake dismounted. "You are letting ditch farmers steal Granite Fork iron." The deputy stepped between him and the channel. "Stay back." Rake's stare fixed on the retaining pin. His purpose showed before he moved. If he pulled it, the position everyone had witnessed would be gone. He splashed into the ditch. "Out!" the deputy ordered. Rake seized the pin. Ezra shouted, "Do not pull that!" Rake jerked it free. Water pressure lifted the half-raised board out of its guides with violent speed. The plank struck the downstream post, spun once and shot into the open current. The full head of Willow Bend burst through the frame. Rake lost his footing. The deputy and Lowell caught his coat and dragged him onto the bank, before the surge carried him under. "Hold him," the deputy said. Two men pinned Rake's arms while he cursed and twisted. Pryce called to his riders, but none crossed the deputy's line. The cedar plank lodged against exposed roots 20 yards below, shuddering beneath the current. "We can reach it from the road bank," Ezra said. "After the gate condition is marked," Viola answered. Even with the ditch roaring, she did not abandon the record. Thomas stayed beside the empty guides while Samuel marked where the pin had sat. Ezra and Lowell used a hooked pole to draw the board against the bank. The old copper strip remained. The 3 old nails remained. The new iron brace and 2 newer nail heads remained. One edge had split farther, but the plank was whole. They wrapped sacking, tied the rope, and pressed Ezra's square nail mark into the knot. Samuel and Thomas signed across the wrapping. "My locked tool shed until morning," Ezra said. "Then I deliver it to the deputy sheriff." Viola turned toward the racing water. "Thomas stays with the mechanism. Samuel warns every farm downstream. Lowell stays with the deputy. Ezra protects the board." Caleb reached Slate. "And us, Red Gate." "Short lane." They rode before Pryce could reshape the event into another argument. The farm lane dropped from the upper bend toward Red Gate's east pasture. Water reached the farm before they did. The east flume bowed outward. Muddy current climbed the upper bank and began cutting toward the orchard. Samuel's oldest son stood at the support with a shovel. Thomas's older daughter had already moved the driest sacks farther beneath the barn roof and shut the livestock gate. The cedar seed chest remained locked in the dry room. Viola slid from the saddle. "Close the first orchard lateral," she called. "Close the beans. Leave the harvested potato line open." Caleb ran toward the flume. "The brace is giving. Do not lift it. Hold it against the post." She pointed toward the bare pasture. "Cut a spill there, ankle deep first. We want a sheet of water, not another ditch." Samuel's son opened the beanboard. Thomas's daughter took a second shovel. Viola marked the line with her boot and drove the first cut into the bank. Caleb caught the flume brace as another surge struck. His left shoulder took the load and folded. "Right side," Viola shouted. "Use your legs. Do not lift." Caleb changed position, set his right shoulder beneath the timber, and braced both boots into the mud. "Holding. Stay there." Viola widened the pasture spill toward the empty grazing strip. Water broke through in a controlled sheet. The orchard lateral stayed closed. The harvested potato line carried part of the current between bare rows. The pasture spread accepted the rest. One more heavy pulse hit. The flume groaned but remained seated. Caleb did not chase the source, did not improvise a stronger plan, and did not leave the position she had given him. He held. By noon, Willow Bend fell from a roar to a deep, steady run. The orchard remained rooted. The barn floor stayed dry. No sound market sack took water. Viola touched the brace. Now, Caleb lowered it with his right arm. His left hand shook when he released the timber. He made no claim that the shoulder was sound. Samuel returned with word that each downstream farm had been warned. Ezra had locked the wrapped plank in his tool shed. The deputy sheriff had taken Rake toward Baker City for ignoring a lawful warning, interfering with the witnessed condition, and disturbing the peace. No one called that a conviction for the theft or the diversion. Pryce remained free. Before sunset, the Willow Bend users signed a temporary operating agreement. No single user, including Granite Fork, would control the upper mechanism alone. Any adjustment required 2 witnesses until the original overflow was restored. Faced with the recovered board, Ezra's testimony, and every downstream account, Pryce signed a limited agreement to pay part of the immediate repair cost without admitting the larger crop damage. The county clerk would file the paper. Civil damages would wait. Viola accepted nothing not written. When the others gathered beside Red Gate before leaving, she gave no speech of forgiveness. "Caleb helped build the original overflow without knowing this gate would be added," she said. "He hid that connection from me. Today he named his part before witnesses and followed my direction when Red Gate was in danger." Caleb stood beside her, not ahead. After the riders left, water moved through the plain pine board in a low, steady run. Caleb pressed his right hand over his stiff left shoulder. "The note is due in 5 days, I know. When it is paid, the bargain ends." Viola faced him across the damp bank. He was not asking for reward. He was returning the choice he should have protected from the beginning. The question between them was no longer whether he would stay, because Redgate needed him. It was whether she would ask him to stay when it did not. By morning, the water had settled into a steady run, but nothing else at Redgate had. On September 29th, Ezra carried the wrapped cedar stop plank to Baker City, with Samuel and Thomas riding beside him. At the sheriff's office, the deputy who had witnessed the hidden gate inspected the unbroken rope. Ezra's square nail mark pressed into the knot, and the 2 signatures written across the sacking. He signed a receipt and placed the physical exhibit in secured storage pending the civil dispute. The county clerk accepted no timber. He filed Ezra's sketch, the witness statements, the inventory of the plank's identifying marks, and the temporary Willow Bend operating agreement. Redgate kept only copies. Viola placed those copies beside her retained debt statement and the bank's letter confirming that Morton Pryce had lodged the original crop note for collection. Then she returned to the work that still stood between survival and payment. From September 29th through October 1st, every sack beneath the barn roof was opened, examined, and tied again. Sound potatoes went toward the buyer's scale. Bruised ones were separated for immediate use. Frost-cut stock went nowhere near the market load. The cedar seed chest remained locked in the dry room. No seed potato was offered for sale. Caleb worked beside Viola without treating the exposed gate as permission to forget what he had concealed. His left shoulder stayed stiff after the flood. He lifted with his right arm, used the mule team for weight that did not require a man's pride, and stopped when Viola told him the joint had begun to fail. At night, he returned to the bunk room. The brass house key remained on the washstand. Neither of them spoke about October 3rd. The date did not need help approaching. The produce buyer arrived shortly after sunrise on October 2nd, carrying Viola's letter and his signed appointment confirmation in the breast pocket of his coat. His 2-horse wagon stood beneath the barn awning, while he hung a scale from the main beam and cut the cord on the first sack. He rolled 3 potatoes through his hands. "Sound," he said. "Mixed size. The larger ones came from the upper rows," Viola replied. "The frost reached us before we finished. Some bruising. Those sacks are against the west wall. They are not part of this sale." The buyer opened one of them anyway, then returned to the sound stock. "You could have mixed these. I could have lost the next buyer with the first dishonest load." Caleb remained by the wagon tongue, holding the mules while Viola negotiated. He did not tell the buyer about the night harvest, the broken lifter, the hidden gate, or the water that had nearly taken the barn. None of those things increased the potatoes' weight. The buyer named a price. Viola named a higher one. He pointed out mixed size. She pointed out dry sacking, clean grading, and the absence of rot. They settled on a deduction for size and nothing more. When the last load was weighed, the total covered the crop note, the hauling charge, and a winter reserve small enough that every dollar already had a task. The milk cows stayed. The seed stayed. Redgate stayed. Viola checked the figures twice before signing the buyer's ledger. Caleb hitched the mule team to the light wagon and placed the leather document case beneath the seat. "Ready?" he asked. Viola took the lines. Yes, they reached Baker City near noon. At the bank, the clerk brought out the original crop note Pryce had lodged for collection. Viola recognized the fold along its center and the dark pressure mark where Pryce's thumb had rested when he offered to trade her own water back to her. The clerk read the payoff amount aloud, counted the buyer's order in cash, then wrote across the face of the paper, "Paid in full, October 2, 1887. He signed, applied the bank stamp, and handed Viola the canceled original with a separate receipt. She checked the date, the amount, and the note number before placing both papers inside the leather case. Caleb waited a pace behind her. He did not reach for the note. Outside, wagon wheels struck the dry street, and the telegraph wire hummed above Baker City. Viola held the document case against her ribs. "It is done," Caleb said. "The debt is done." "Yes, and the rest?" She faced the road toward Redgate. "The rest reaches its date tomorrow." Caleb accepted that answer without asking her to soften it. They drove home with the afternoon sun behind them. He unloaded the empty sacks, watered the mules, checked the plain pine board, and ate supper at the kitchen table. Nothing in his manner asked for advance payment on hope. Before dawn on October 3rd, Viola saw lamplight beneath the bunkroom door. Slate stood saddled at the rail. The cinch hung loose, not ready for departure until Caleb chose to tighten it. His bedroll was tied behind the saddle. His hand tools were wrapped in canvas. Inside the kitchen, the brass house key lay on the table beside his signed copy of the marriage terms and the inventory witnessed by Mr. Hollister. Caleb stood near the cold stove wearing his work coat. "You are leaving," Viola said. "The bargain is complete." "That was not my question." His hand rested on the back of a chair. "No, I do not want to leave." Viola stepped to the table and touched the key. "Then why return this?" "Because wanting to remain does not give me the right. We are still married." "Yes." "The terms allowed either of us to leave after harvest. They did not end the marriage." "No." Caleb's gaze did not shift toward the hallway. "But I came here for reasons I hid. I used your need for labor to stay near ground I wanted to investigate. I withheld the truth before you gave me your name. Work cannot purchase forgiveness for that. You helped save the crop. You chose how to save it. You held the flume. Where you told stand, you testified against Pryce's lie after giving him part of it to use." His voice remained level. "I love you, Viola. That does not make the first choice fair." She let the words stand without rescuing him from them. "When did you decide you loved me?" "Not on one day." "Then do not turn 6 weeks into a speech." A brief understanding crossed his face. "I began to know when you passed water downstream that your own crop needed. I knew more when you sent me for Ezra and trusted me with one promise. After that I kept seeing the same woman in harder places." Viola lifted the brass key. "I do not have certainty. I am not asking for it." "Good. Men who promise certainty usually mean obedience." She crossed the kitchen. "What I have is choice." Caleb remained where he was. "And what do you choose?" "The man who came back when I asked. The man who stood beside me when stepping ahead would have made him feel stronger. The man who admitted wrong without asking me to comfort him for it." She placed the key in his palm and closed his fingers around it. "I choose you to stay." His breath left slowly. "Not because winter is near, no. Not because Red Gate needs another pair of hands. The farm will always need hands." Viola laid her own hand over his. "I am asking for yours, because they learned when not to take hold." She kissed him first. Caleb raised his right hand toward her cheek, then stopped short. Viola closed the remaining distance and leaned into his palm. Only then did he draw her nearer. When the kiss ended, he did not move toward the hallway. The bedroom door remained closed. His bedroll remained tied outside. That evening after supper, Viola took her bedroom key from her pocket and crossed the hall. Caleb stayed by the table. She unlocked the door herself, opened it, and faced him from the threshold. "You may come in." Caleb removed his hat. He followed only after she stepped inside. Outside, Slate's saddle rested on its rack beside the barn wall. The gelding remained at Red Gate, Sua. By April, Caleb's coat hung from a permanent peg inside Red Gate, but Viola still opened the water herself. At 6 on a cold spring morning, she lifted the plain pine board at the head gate and watched Willow Bend enter the first planting furrow in a measured run. No sudden pulse, no empty channel. The cedar stop plank with her father's copper repair remained in secured storage at the Baker County Courthouse, wrapped beneath Ezra Latham's mark, and listed in the county clerk's filed inventory. Viola did not need it returned. Red Gate had survived without turning evidence into a keepsake. Behind her, Slate stood hitched to a light planter, his breath pale in the air. Caleb held the lines in his right hand. His left shoulder sat lower beneath his work shirt and resisted the morning cold as stubbornly as ever. "North rise first?" he asked. "North rise first. Depth, 2 inches in the lower ground, shallow over the crown. If the left wheel sinks, stop. Do not ask the horse to correct the field." Caleb rested one boot on the planter step. "I remember," you asked. Remembering does not make asking useless. Viola closed the first lateral when the water reached her marked line. That is an improvement. The asking? Knowing which questions matter. Slate started at her command. The planter blade entered dark soil, and Caleb guided it along the row Viola had marked with stakes. He no longer asked permission for every turn of a wrench, or every gate he already understood. He asked when a choice could cost seed, water, property, or trust. The difference had taken a winter to learn. The cedar seed chest rode on the low wagon near the field edge. Its old iron handle faced Viola. The ash handle Caleb had added faced the road. Inside lay bean packets tied with thread, seed potatoes packed in dry straw, and 3 apple cuttings from Thomas Venn's strongest trees. Viola opened the chest, selected the first basket, then closed the lid and tested the repaired latch. Caleb came to the opposite side. "Ready?" She took the iron handle. "Lift." They raised it together. His right arm carried more of his share, while the left remained close to his ribs. Viola adjusted her grip until the chest stayed level. They set it on 2 flat stones at the end of the row. No one praised the second handle. It had become part of the work, which was a better fate for any promise. By noon, the first potato rows lay planted behind Slate's tracks. Caleb unhitched the gelding, rubbed his shoulders, and checked the harness for chafing. His mountain saddle hung inside the barn beside the farm harness. He still used it. Twice in March, he had ridden toward Baker City to help bring cattle from winter pasture. He took wages under his own name and entered every dollar in the account book, without pretending the money purchased Red Gate. Before accepting either job, he and Viola had discussed the water turns, the planting dates, and the labor the farm would need while he was gone. The first departure had brought an old fear into the yard with his packed bedroll. Caleb had not answered it with a vow too large to trust. "Thursday before dark," he had said. He returned Thursday, while sunlight still touched the red crosspiece above the gate. Since then, leaving had become a road with a named return, rather than the beginning of abandonment. They ate bread, cheese, and cold beef in the wagon's shade. Caleb rolled his stiff shoulder once. "It will rain by tomorrow." Viola glanced at the cloud line over the blue mountains. "Late tomorrow. Enough to delay the lower beans? One day. Then we finish potatoes and move the chest before supper." "Yes." He handed her the water cup before drinking from it himself. The gesture was small and no longer rare. Viola accepted it without turning kindness into debt. Beyond Red Gate, Willow Bend followed the rotation written by its users. Ezra had restored the old overflow to its original height before winter. The concealed guides had been removed. No single ranch or farm could work the upper control alone. 2 ditch users had to witness every change and enter the hour in the shared ledger. The arrangement was slower than Morton Pryce's private command had been. It was also harder to steal. Pryce had paid the first repair amount required by the written agreement. The claim for fence and crop damage remained unsettled, moving through statements and civil demands rather than threats delivered from horseback. He still owned Granite Fork. He still had cattle, money, and men willing to work for him. What he no longer possessed was Red Gate's debt or Willow Bend's silence. Alden Rake had been released after answering for his conduct at the hidden gate. He returned to Granite Fork briefly, then left before Christmas. No one along Willow Bend had seen him since. That afternoon, Viola planted the final seed potatoes while Caleb followed with the planter. When the last row was covered, they lifted the cedar seed chest by its 2 handles and returned it to the wagon. The sky had begun to soften toward rain. At the house, Caleb hung his work coat on the peg beside hers. The bunkroom now held spare harness leather, tools, and 2 folded grain sacks. His shirts shared the wardrobe in Viola's room because she had opened that door on October 3rd and had never withdrawn the invitation. No child's cradle stood by the bed. No sudden fortune filled the bank. Home had arrived through less dramatic evidence. Boots left to dry beside each other. 1 lamp burning later than intended. A promised return kept. A man who spoke before accepting work that would take him away. Near sunset, Samuel Brody waited below the headgate with the Willow Bend rotation ledger tucked beneath his arm. Thomas Venn's older daughter sat her horse farther down the shared road, ready to carry the hour to the orchard turn. Viola checked the marked stick. Red Gate closes in 3 minutes. Samuel opened the ledger. Caleb stood beside him with the pencil, but he did not reach for the board. At the 3rd minute, Viola lowered the plain pine plank and sent the remaining water downstream. Samuel called the time. Caleb recorded it. The current moved on without argument. Viola climbed the bank and brushed mud from her skirt. Caleb offered his hand where the edge had crumbled during winter. She did not need it. She took it anyway. They walked toward the red gate, while the first drops of rain darkened the dust. Slate waited beneath the barn, lean-to, the planter cleaned and covered. The mountain saddle and farm harness hung side by side in the open doorway. Caleb stopped beneath the weathered red crosspiece. "Do you regret what you said the day I came?" Viola rested one hand on the latch. "Which part?" "That you needed a husband, not a cowboy." She considered the man outside her gate that August morning. One horse, one bedroll, no land, no promise of wealth, only useful hands, an unfinished truth, and enough restraint to wait until she opened the way. He had failed her before learning how to stay. Then he had answered for it without demanding that good work erase bad choice. "I was wrong about one thing," she said. Caleb waited. He had learned how. Viola opened the red gate and took his hand. As they crossed the ground they had both chosen. "I needed a man willing to learn the ground he meant to stay on."